Welcome to the Coroner's Report, Episode 6 of Miss Maybelline, the Pied Piper, and a Clown Named Hobby. Before we begin, please remember this is a true crime podcast with adult themes. Please be aware when possible the actual person's voice is in this podcast. However, several witnesses are deceased and some chose not to be recorded. Still others agreed for their words to be used, but not their real names. Please remember to like and follow us on all social media platforms or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. All suspects or persons of interest mentioned within are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
My last words with Danny were, he drove me to the bus station and told me I'd better get out of Arkansas and never come back. And he told me, he said, you know things about me that could get me in a lot of trouble. And he said, and you'd better leave and never come back, because I guarantee you that you'll end up in the bottom of the lake. That's the first time I've told anybody that.
Welcome back to the Coroner's Report. My name is Steve Navoychek. I'm a retired coroner of two of the largest counties in Arkansas and a former state crime lab director. Along with my partners, Tracy Carrington and Carla Bozeman, I've been reviewing old cases. Evelyn Williams married into the family that founded Maybelline, and she lived a remarkable life until she landed in Hot Springs, Arkansas, where she flipped a skating rink into a dinner club with the help of her friend Danny King. She died in a strange fire in her home, and in our previous episodes, we investigated the cause of the fire and found out it was arson, but not who did it. In our last episode, we honed in on possible suspects, including her third ex-husband, Hobby Derrick, the Dixie Mafia, and her friend and hairdresser, Danny King. Now we continue the story on old Danny King, the Pied Piper. Yep, old Danny King. He was quite the gentleman and the charmer.
Danny stayed in Hot Springs as the estate went through the probate process. He and his business partner Roger were busy with their modeling and photography business. Jilted by Danny, Steve Wyatt returned to California, but remained hopeful that they might one day rekindle their romance. Enter Mary Anderson. Mary was a wealthy and flamboyant black restaurateur from Chicago. Mary had been born into poverty in the Delta, but had managed to strike gold with her move to Chicago in the 1940s. Not a lot is known about Mary, or how her soul food restaurant made her a multi-millionaire. But she had retired back to Hot Springs and lived in a beautiful home on the lake. She loved the finer things in life, much like Evelyn. And she drove a Bentley. She also needed assistance, so Danny called Steve Wyatt and asked him to return to Hot Springs.
I was introduced to Mary, and she called me up the next day at Danny's house, and she asked me to come over and she wanted to talk with me, and I went over, and that's when she offered me the job. Mary did not like Roger, and she always said Danny was a fool to give me up and have Roger.
For several months, all seemed good. Danny and Roger were building their modeling business, and Steve Wyatt was taking care of Mary Anderson. But soon, strange things started happening. But soon, their lives would all change once again. Remember how history sometimes repeats itself? While Danny was befriending Mary Anderson, the local fire department was busy. On March 8, 1979, a little over a year to the day of the fire at the manor, a fire was reported at the closed Palace Dinner Theater. Lieutenant Bob Griffith with the Hot Springs Police Department again investigated, but from his statements in the paper, he now seemed unsure of the cause of the earlier fire at the Maybelline Manor and definitely believed there could be a link. After all, how many folks have a house fire and a fire at their business all within a year?
Someone entered the building through an outside air conditioning vent and set fires inside the theater, causing about $2,000 worth of damage. We pulled all the old files on the Williams case. We're investigating the arson at the theater, and hopefully, if we're successful in that area, it may revert back to the Evelyn Williams fire. The only thing that was determined out there was that we had two separate fires. What the accelerant was, we don't know. I'm not convinced foul play was not involved in the fire, but arson is an awfully difficult thing to prove. I'm hopeful an investigation into a suspected arson at the Palace Dinner Theater will enable us to reopen a year-old investigation into the death of Evelyn Williams.
And the police did investigate. They called in Angie Sheets, who had been a teenager at the skating rink with her husband, for questioning.
My ex-husband and I were questioned were even brought into the police station and questioned on the fire at the palace. And I'm not sure whatever transpired from that. And I don't know what part of the palace it was or how extensive it was. Obviously not real extensive, because now there's a strip club there. What a combination.
But arsons, as you know by now, are awfully hard to prove.
It was a burglary-type arson. I'm just not satisfied. In major cases of this kind, there's always a doubt. Whether or not we can come to a conclusion on it, I don't know. After 3 years, there are no suspects, not even any clues. The classic perfect crime.
The police again hit a brick wall. Even the newspaper reporter seemed frustrated that there was no solution reached, no resolution for what happened, nor who did it. And like all of the local police records, this file is missing too.
Arson was strongly suspected in the fire that caused the 77-year-old woman's death, but was never ruled the official cause of the blaze, although investigators determined 2 fires started in different sections of the lakeside mansion at the same time. However, fire investigators have now ruled arson as the cause of the March 30th fire at the Palace Theater, which has been closed since shortly after Miss Williams' death.
Oh boy, what luck. Another fire. So why? Why would anyone set fire to an empty club that was tied up in a probate? Who stood to gain if the palace burned? The probate of Evelyn's estate had been ongoing for over a year. A few months after that fire, Danny filed a lawsuit against Evelyn's grandson, Preston Williams III, to force the sale of the palace property in order to recover his 25% share. The judge ruled in Danny's favor. After all was said and done, Danny received $15,000 in cash and about $30,000 from the palace sale to net him around $45,000, minus whatever he ended up paying for his attorney. That is about $216,000 in today's money. Not a bad payday. Fire just seemed to be a running theme throughout this story. So as the probate settled out, the relationship between Danny and Steve was burning white hot after a series of strange occurrences, according to Steve Wyatt. It's kind of hard to tell, without other witnesses, what was really going on in their relationship. All that we do really know is that Steve Wyatt was let go by Mary after being accused of stealing jewelry.
Again, this is just hearsay because Steve said it and there are no corroborating witnesses.
There was a guy that did things for Danny, like bully boy type things. So I was in town at one of the clubs. Danny came in telling me that he needed me to leave. And I told him that, he didn't have any business coming in telling me what to do. So he leaves and he comes back in with this guy. And this guy grabs me and breaks my little finger. And, grabs me by the neck and burns my wrist. That's how he broke my finger. Takes me out and puts me in the back of the Lincoln Continental. That's when Danny told me that I knew stuff about him that could destroy him. And I was driven to the bus station, put on a bus, and told not to come back or I would end up at the bottom of the lake.
After Steve left town, Mary made the decision to move back to Chicago, and Danny and Roger went with her. So what really happened that spring day in 1978? 46 years later, we still don't definitively know, other than the fire was an arson and Evelyn did die. We asked during our interviews, and the people who lived through this nightmare still have questions and opinions.
Dan Clinton, the teenage kid who served as a roadie for the band Kids, looks back and compares his time around the Maybelline Queen as sort of like the Hotel California.
To be honest, I don't know other than what was in the papers, but nothing was surprising me back then. That's pretty odd for someone that's 17 years old who hasn't really lived anywhere else but Hot Springs, Arkansas. It was all surreal, but none of it surprised me. Just looked like the crazy life got to everybody.
Clint Allen was the drummer in the Kids rock band, and he believed there was only 1 or 2 suspects.
I mean, at the end of the day, Danny and Steve had more to gain from her demise than anybody. Jay is not an arsonist, nor would he have any motive to do it. We shared the same sentiment that Danny torched the house and left her in it. We've always thought that.
Angie Sheets, looking back, says no one wanted to harm Evelyn.
What I remember is she passed away in that fire, and it was very devastating. They were so excited about the club. And I don't know that anybody would have had such a vendetta that they would have gone to that length to do something so horrible to her. I think Danae got a really bad rap from that. People wanted to make him a monster. I believe that she was making herself something to eat, and she had it on the stove, and it caused a grease fire. I don't know if she fell asleep, and they had troubles with the front doorknob at the mansion. And unfortunately, when she went to go out that door, that handle, from how I have heard it, came off, and she was unable to open the door, and the fire must have spread very rapidly. That was what I have heard.
If you like the Coroner's Report and the programming we're providing, please remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so we can keep providing quality programming. Like and subscribe today.
Steve Wyatt spent the last 46 years wondering about what really happened so long ago in Arkansas.
I had told him about the bearer bonds that Evelyn had me hide. He knew nothing about them, and then they came up missing. And I've always kind of wondered if he had anything to do with that whole situation, and that it just got out of control, and that how convenient it would be if the house burned and the bearer bonds burned up. I'm inclined to think even more so that Danny was involved. And it's like my theory that it was about burning the house down so that the bonds have burned in the fire.
Time moved on, and 3 years later, the last article in the local newspaper about the mysterious fire was published.
At the site on Brown Drive, amid the rubble of the once majestic home, there remains a dozen sorted shoes, 3 wigs, a purple pocketbook, a black silky bra, a bikini top, a vacuum cleaner case, and several other items slightly charred by the fire. Why were these items left untouched for 3 years and never taken by the police as evidence? Could not some of the items been examined for fingerprints or other clues to help identify someone who may have visited or secretly lived at the house and have started the fire, or at least know who did?
Grover Douglas, the chief of the Hot Springs Police Department, was quoted in the article.
I never personally went to the Maybelline Manor site, but I'm sure if our investigators left those items there, they didn't think they were important to the case.
To many involved in this case, the lack of resolution really bothers them. Jim Hawley, the medic, certainly never stopped wondering.
Well, look at the facts. She comes to town. She's kind of a popular figure. She does something that nobody's done in Hot Springs. She opens this club. All the big wigs are there. Conway Twitty was there. And the next day she dies in a fire. She's living with this controversial guy. And then there's the fire starting in multiple places in the house. A doorknob that's found on the floor. Chicken in the pot. I mean, does any of it really make sense?
Years later, he was asked about his strangest case.
2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about the fire service and weird situations that you come by. And being a New York City paramedic, the question is always asked, what's the strangest things you've ever encountered? And I said, well, it didn't happen in New York City. You know, it happened in Hot Springs, Arkansas back in the 70s. We Googled her name and started to look at the clippings and stuff that were online. And I realized it was unsolved. And then there's, you know, the whole Danny King thing and his living there. And that whole investigative process was a little wonky from the beginning. You know, there was a lot of speculation that went around town. My personal opinion was that they just wanted to squash it. Very sad situation.
Even Joe Warren, the leader of the Kids Rock Band and the owner of Apple Records, he asked all the same questions over all these years.
First, my mind went to Danny King, you know, but then again, after I thought about it, you know, I thought about it all day and for several days and maybe several weeks. He was cutting the lifeline of his fabulous life, you know, if he was involved in that.
Right.
That to me didn't make sense, you know, because he had no job. That was his income, and he was very flamboyant. And it just didn't make sense to me for him to be involved in that unless there was some kind of insurance policy or some kind of weird stuff that he would get when it was done. I just don't know. But I don't see it because of the lifestyle he liked, and she provided that.
Or maybe just maybe, the townspeople saw him as an outsider and assumed his guilt.
Someone like me coming to town, seemingly larger than life, spreading money around, and all the other things I got away with, did irritate locals. I don't know. But I've got nothing but positive vibes. But that was the story.
What surprised me was learning a large chunk of the file was missing. Arkansas State Police investigator David Hendershot describes an incredibly active 9-day investigation.
I did a bunch of interviews. There was a bunch of interviews I did that were friends with Danny, knew him well, and had been to that house.
Fire expert John Flaster also noticed something strange about the Arkansas State Police file.
Another thing, what I read was they had it titled Crime Scene Search. It goes into a fire scene investigation. I still haven't figured that one out. I've never seen that before. It doesn't make sense. A crime scene search is just what that is. That's more on the PD side. So I don't understand. It's like they're mixing apples and oranges here. So, and nowhere in that did it say fire scene investigation.
Even Steve Wyatt wonders what happened that March day in 1978. And he was there.
Well, he was with me, so he had an alibi. He wasn't with me when the fire happened. I know where he was. Do I think it's possible that he may have started the fire? I know Evelyn was wanting to make some changes in her life, and I had told Danny about those bearer bonds. Danny's a very greedy person, so my thought, like I said, the bearer bonds came up missing. What better way to have them go missing than a house fire? Things got out of control, and he had these young guys who did things for him. I don't know what they were. That was totally separate from anything I ever knew. It seemed kind of shady.
Many folks like Joe Warren expected Danny to be arrested right after the fire.
But I do remember being, what in the hell do they need to wait for? Why don't they take him in? Why don't they charge him with this? I was curious as to why nothing happened. And I really wasn't sure what was slapping him in the face to where they couldn't, or what he was pulling to where they couldn't.
This story, these characters, they really do stick with you. Even retired Arkansas State Police investigator David Hendershot still thought of Danny occasionally.
There's no doubt he's another Tiger King, or worse. He reminded me of when I saw the Tiger King. I said, man, I know that son of a bitch.
I'll tell you what, trying to capture the truth in all this is like trying to catch the fog in a jar. It's very elusive.
Oh, Lord. Danny left Hot Springs behind, but within a few years he began a new venture as an internationally known skincare expert and a pioneer in the research of botanical chemistry. By the 1990s, he evolved into Dr. Danae Montague King, and he advertises himself as a doctor, biochemist, and enzymeologist. Dr. King claims to have helped both Brad Pitt and Cindy Crawford. And Dr. King has written a book and produced a movie of his time spent with Evelyn Williams. We did reach out several times for an interview, but he wasn't impressed with the size of our audience.
My IT person and also my social media person, and he said don't even bother talking to you because you have a very small following with your podcast. So that's why, because it doesn't matter. And I guess it still doesn't matter if that's true.
So what have we learned? What actually happened? Besides, Danny obviously pays attention to size.
Each one of these podcasts comes with a lesson. For me, it's a haunting cautionary tale about financial abuse of the elderly. Evelyn was an independent woman, very capable of making her own decisions, but she was older and had started acting out of character. She trusted the wrong people, starting with her ex-husband, Hobby, and his stepdaughter/ex-wife. Oh, and yeah, nothing screams Arkansas hillbilly more than having an Uncle Daddy and being here in Arkansas. But this crazy story all starts right back in that salon in California when Delisle introduces Evelyn to Hobby and then to Danny. As for the fire and her death, what do you think happened? We know it was arson, but why did the police close the case?
So it appears that the police just closed the case down based on what they heard from the crime lab. And I got to tell you, at the time, the crime lab was considered to be the experts, and they were billed as the experts. And that was the beginning of the time in Arkansas when we really began to understand the importance of forensics. And if you'll remember too, Quincy was popular then. And so based on kind of what people saw on TV, if the crime lab said it, that's the way it was. It's sad that the case was closed based on what the crime lab said, because as we learned later, the crime lab certainly were not the experts that they were believed to be. And that's no telling how many cases around the state were shut down because the crime lab did or did not find evidence. And it's sad.
There are questions which are as haunting as the memory of Evelyn. Why would the three young men, each having such close daily contact with Evelyn, not at least have some idea of who would want to kill her? Was there a connection between the fire and the false alarm bomb threat received later that evening at the now defunct Palace Dinner Theater, partly owned at the time by one of the men who lived in the mansion? The questions will likely become even more difficult to answer.
Almost half a century has come and gone. Young men grew old, hopes and dreams faded, and new ones took their place. But some things really never change. Danny came back to Arkansas in 2023 to screen his movie at a film festival in Fayetteville and met up with a few old friends in Hot Springs. He revisited the building that once housed all of his dreams. Today it's a strip club. He stood at what was once the driveway to Evelyn's home, which was redeveloped into condominiums. Under the facade he's carefully created and forged over all these years, one has to wonder who really resides in there. Harry Daniel Alkire, raised in Kent, Washington in the 50s, never looked back.
Apparently I was pushy and loudmouth, but I delivered. And that's the whole thing about life, is no matter how self-promotional or promotional you are, no matter who you think you want to be, what level of notoriety or fame or whatever, that's fine, as long as you deliver the goods. She just had such faith in me. And she was a significant change in my life. I don't think I could have ever gone on and become the person I am today. I was very sincere in that time. I really did enhance Evelyn's life. Had she gone back to California after the divorce, she would have just died a, fading socialite in Newport Beach on Lido Island. She wouldn't have had the glamorous life and open up a dinner theater to all those celebrities and people and cheering and looking gorgeous the night before she died. I mean, what a way to go when you think about it. That's the end of that. She was kind of the original Me Too woman. She knew how to manipulate men while pretending to acquiesce to everything they wanted out of her, but actually she was the one in charge. I'm far, far wealthier than Evelyn ever was at any time now. So whatever you think you're doing with this, that's fine. I will sue. And I will win because I have an enormous amount of money and a good legal department. And, if it came into a court situation, you'd probably end up, you have to remove it, take it down. All right? All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
The last quote Evelyn gave in print was from a poem by George Eliot that her granddaughter, Sherry, recited in the 6th grade. Sherry agreed to share it once again.
If you sit down at the set of sun and count the acts that you have done, and counting find one self-denying deed, one word that eased the heart of him who heard, one glance most kind that fell like sunshine where it went, then you can count that day well spent.
This concludes Miss Maybelline, the Pied Piper, and a Clown Named Hobby series. Our team will always be looking for answers. If you have information you'd like to share, please reach out to us on our website at coronersreport.net or on any social media platform at The Coroner's Report. This case can still be solved, but we need your help. And don't forget to like and subscribe us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks goes out to all who made this podcast possible, including Evelyn's granddaughter, Sherry Williams, who sat for hours of interviews and provided the voice to her grandmother's words. We would also like to thank Rick Warren, Angie Sheets, Steve Wyatt, Danny Clinton, Jim Hawley, David Hendershot, Clint Allen, and John Flasterer for allowing us to interview and record their memories and expertise. Special thanks goes to voice actors Alan Prather and J.D. West. Additional information about this story may be found in the following books: The Maybelline Story and The Spirited Family Dynasty Behind It, written by Evelyn's granddaughter Sherry Williams, and The Maybelline Prince, written by Danae Montague King.